Hey guys, this is Hudzg, currently playing for Team Dignitas. I had a lot of questions over iSeries on Facebook and things like that about how I set up my PC for LAN and what sort of settings I was using in Counter-Strike Go. So I thought for the people that wanted to see, I'll just make this video explaining everything, how I set up at a LAN and how I have my config in Counter-Strike Global Offensive. So the first thing I'll do when I set up on a tournament PC is I'll go to the control panel, I'll go to mouse, and I'll just make sure that this is on 6 out of 11 in Windows, and enhanced pointer precision is off, so no acceleration, and just make sure that's default setting, like that. Raw input actually, m_raw input actually overrides this, and it uses that by default, but it's just a habit, and I just want to make sure everything's as default as possible. I then go to programming features and remove any drivers that don't coincide with my mouse. So if I use Razer, I'll remove SteelSeries ones, things like that. Or if I use a QPad mouse or an MCATS mouse, I'll just remove any other alien drivers that I don't want on the PC. Again, raw input also overrides this, but if you use a mouse that does use drivers, it's best to have just those drivers on the PC. Then what I'll do is I'll come to the Nvidia control panel or ATI control panel, depending on what purely depending on what the PC has, and then I'll go into them, manage 3D settings. I'll click restore here. I go down, vertical sync off, and apply. And that's the only thing I do in the 3D settings. I don't change anything else in the 3D settings. You can sometimes change this option here to high performance if the PC is not so great, but I just leave everything as default. Going away from that, I then just go into adjust desktop color settings and use digital vibrance 80%. I had a lot of questions in the past why people wondered why I didn't use like 100 and why specifically 80. The reason for this is in CGS you actually could only use a maximum of 80%, I believe. 100% was banned, something with the TV reduction, I can't remember exactly, and it's just a nice balance, and I've got used to it for 3, 4, 5 years now, so you know that's what I'm used to and that's what I use. Last thing here, I'll just go to adjust desktop size and position and just click aspect ratio because I play with the black bars down the side. You do actually gain an advantage if you use widescreens or a widescreen stretch resolution, but it's only minimal and it's not that important. I just like the black bars down the side and the 4:3 scaling, so yeah, that's it. And obviously this monitor can do 144 Hz, but I only use it on 120. That's just a mistake. If you go screen resolution advanced monitor, it's actually on 120 here, so yeah, like that, done. And then what I'll do is I'll come to here, Google, and I'll type in HOD USBF, and I'll come to this page here. Now I use this because I've got a very old mouse. A lot of you will have new mice from QPad or Mad Cats or SteelSeries, Razer, people like that, and you'll have a plug-in play 1000 Hz. I use an Intelli 3.0 right now, and you don't have that luxury, so you actually have to manually overclock the USB Hertz to 500. And if you follow everything on this link, it's perfectly fine and it works, and no damage is done to the PC. And then just to double check, you've got 500 Hz. You come here and you just do that, and it's 500. Average is 500. So that's the thing I'll do. Then I'll reboot my PC, and then I'm almost there. So I've gone from plugging everything in, checking my Nvidia, checking my control panel, the drivers, to setting up 500 Hz. Then what I want to do is I want to log into my Steam. I want to go properties down here, set launch options, and I just want to set these launch options. These aren't important. These two don't really do anything, they're just a habit from source now, but this one is important. This sets my refresh rate in game. If you've got 120 Hz monitor on the stage, you want that. If you've only got 75, then you want to change that to 75 or whatever value the monitor is. So close them too. Then, last but not least, I'll come in and I want to load my config into the game. If there's no GUI specifically installed, then you're allowed to use your own config in CSGO right now. So I'll just take you through my config and everything in it, and then I'll go into the game and show you the last few settings. So all this is just fluff. This is just so it looks nice in the console. You've got the Dig logo and ASCII. you again just fluff these things. So don't worry too much about them. They're just to make the config look nice for users. This sets my FPS max to 999. This is so basically if you have a 120 Hz monitor, you need double your refresh rate in FPS. So if I've got 120 Hz, I want 240 FPS. So if I could get 240 FPS all the time, I'd just cap it off. But 999, it always stays over that. I don't really mind what the number goes to. Sometimes I get maybe 700 if I've got a good PC, or right now maybe 300. As long as it stays high, I just allow it to spike to whatever it wants to in CSGO. Again, personal preference. If you played 1.6, you'll want that on 1.2, the zoom sensitivity ratio. But all source users will keep it at 1.0 because it was like that in source. HUD scaling, all that does is change my HUD so it's a big size. And again, that just makes sound more responsive. It's perfectly legal in all tournaments thus far. These two options here are to do with the mouse. This makes sure I have 0 acceleration in game. And this one here, make sure that it overrides any drivers, and it uses raw input. It's the best form of mouse tracking at the moment in games. It overrides all drivers pretty much and uses 6 of 11 windows. Now, if I'm using a Zowie mouse or I'm using an IntelliThreeplet, I want that on 1 because you don't really use drivers with those mice. If I'm using Razer gear or if I'm using Steel Series, you can have either just set your stuff through the drivers directly, or you can use MRAW input and set it up through Windows. It's however you want to do it, but I like to have MRAW input 1, so I get the same sensitivity over all the PCs I use. And that's the same if I've got 120 Hz or if I've got 75 Hz. My sensitivity never changes, so that's perfect. This makes sure when I fire the traces come out the weapon. That's a default value. You can actually turn that off in tournaments as well. I like to have it on so you can see the spray and the traces, how they go. I recommend beginners to keep that on as well. That's perfect for all beginners. That here is just fluff. That's literally when I do matchmaking. It doesn't get me a ping higher than that. This command here is an alias. So when I scroll up with my mouse wheel, it only gets my primary weapon out, and you'll see that in my binds. This I'll come back to in a second. Netcode, that's just default. You want all this, basically. That doesn't really make a difference. You can have 128,000, it's just a random number. That's the netcode everyone uses. Again, all my binds here. If you use my config, you want to change these. I use things like Z to buy, that not everyone will use, and mouse wheel up to go to my primary weapon. Things like that, and I use T to drop as well, so you might want to change all that. This is just all my binds, so every time I go into a game, I load my auto exec, I know I've got all my binds, so I don't even need to go into the game and change my bindings, they'll all be there. And that command there basically unbinds everything anyway. So if I go on a PC, say a NIP have just been on the PC, and I go and I put my config on, it'll unbind all their stuff and bind all my stuff on top. So I'll have all my binds that I use at home. So that's really good having that in your config. Crosshair, again, great to have in your config. Just take you through some of the settings. I have Crosshair Alpha 999. What this does is it makes it as solid as possible. So I don't have a see-through crosshair. I have crosshair color green. These colors don't apply, it's just green default. I don't have the crosshair dot, I don't like it. Gap is default, 0. You can set, I use a value between 0 or 1 depending how I feel. And size, I use a big crosshair because I used to use 640, 480 in source and large, so that's kind of close to it in 1024. Thickness, in CSGO the crosshair thickness is kind of thin, and the models actually don't stand out as much as in source because a lot of the backgrounds are very, very detailed. So I like to have a big thick crosshair in Global Offensive so I can see better, as the maps are a bit more detailed in appearance, so it's hard to sometimes pick out a CT model. For example, if I'm in long A pit and I'm looking to A site and dust 2, it's quite hard with an AK, so it's just nice to have. Use alpha, that just makes sure it uses that alpha. Right hand one. I use right hand one. There's a test you can do online about your dominant eye, and basically my dominant eye, you use the opposite of what your dominant eye is. I use right hand one. I've always used right hand one. Some people use left. You can actually determine that with your dominant eye test, so it might be worth doing that, but otherwise it's just personal preference. So going back to these commands, all these do is all the sources pretty much, Fiflaren, Freiburg, Very Games, all the sources pretty much use these settings. You can set them to whatever you want. You can have a Wolfenstein gun style or not. It's entirely up to you. But this mimics CSS the closest. Since the beta, everyone's used these. So all that does is set the model in a position on the screen that mimics CSS. These ones, basically what they do is they stop when you run default in CSGO, the gun will sync back into you, and if anyone's played 1.6 the source, it doesn't actually do that. So these are perfectly legal in leagues. What they do is they just make it so when you run, the gun doesn't shift back into your body, and when you crouch, the gun doesn't move left because you're gaining accuracy, which is what these two do. When you crouch and gain more accuracy with the gun, this goes inwards to the left, and this one, when you decrease in accuracy, goes out to the right. It's horrible. So I have them on 0. These commands should be kept as default. They actually affect the scope. They don't have any effect on when you're running the model syncing back into you. It's purely scope based, so I think these will be forced in all leagues soon. They make the scope basically default how it should be in CSGO. It's not ideal. I don't particularly like the scope in CSGO, but to make sure you're legal in all the leagues, just keep them on default and get used to it. Otherwise, you might end up being banned or getting penalty points for something that you don't want. So, best just to keep them on default. Those are default values. Those are perfectly legal to change. All they do is a visual for the model syncing back, and the same with that. That's just visual. That actually affects the game, and you want all on default. So yeah, that's literally my config. So I pop that into this folder here. So your CSGO common Counter-Strike Global CSGO config. Pop that into there, and then what I'll do is I'll load up the game and I'll take you in game and just confirm everything in there. So whilst the game loads, so all I do is I'll go into game now and I'll just show you how I have everything on my menus and things like that. So now I'm in game. Basically the first thing I'll do as I get into game is actually go into keyboard and mouse, and I'll just make sure everything's how I want. 2.6 sensitivity, zoom sensitivity 1, raw input on. I'll turn mouse acceleration on and drag that to the furthest it'll go off, and then turn it off. And then again, it's just your binds, which I set up in the config. So that's all in my config anyway, so I know none of that's going to be different. So use key caps lock, things like that. These two you want the same as source. If you set it to toggle, then it basically just means it's kind of like COD. If you hit one of them, it'll go like COD. It'll just toggle it, so you want them on hold. Reverse mouse off if you don't like playing like an aeroplane. Controller you don't touch. Game settings, classic static, which is cool. Green, just obviously your team logo. Switch weapon on pickup, no. So when I run over a weapon, it doesn't automatically switch to it. You want that off, really. Have that on yes. So when I buy something, it closes, so I reopen the buy menu, kind of like source. I have that off as well. I don't need to see my inventory all the time. View model position classic, which isn't true, as you can see in the config. I'll show you in a second. It changes. Enable game instructor messages. These are things like when you run over the bomb, you want that off. It won't come up with an annoying message telling you to like cancel the bomb, things like that. So audio settings, I have it on 2 speakers. Master volume, I have music completely off, and master volume I change. So 2 speakers. Some people have it on headphones. I found that the audio quality and hearing position is much better with 2 speakers. So yeah. So then I go video. Brightness 2 on my BenQ. 2 is perfectly bright. Some people have it on 1.6 in their game, but I just prefer it on this. Color mode disabled. HUD scale again, like I said, it's on 1. Now this is just for the video. Normally I'll have it on 1024 768. I just have it on 12.7 1280 720 for the video purpose, and obviously full screen in game. Laptop power saving is disabled, and then that's personal preference as well. So if we go video settings again and then to go into advanced, okay. So this is where I go into the game. I have global shadow quality on low, model texture detail low. You can have that on medium if the PC can handle it, so the models might stand out a bit better, look a bit more detailed. Effect detail low, shader detail low. Multi-core rendering, that's for if you've got a quad core or a dual core. It enables the cores, so it uses all the power. For CSGO, you want that enabled really. Anti-aliasing off. I don't like having anti-aliasing, it makes everything look blurred on distance. So it doesn't make anything look crisp at all. This, however, makes things look a lot more sharp. So I'll have that on 4 times. If the PC can handle it, you can even take it up. You can maybe go 8 times. Things like outside rafters on Nuke in Source and CSGO, it makes it more detailed. And again, just everything here disabled. You want motion blur, vertical sync off, things like that. So okay, discard, and I'll just load the game and show you what it looks like in game. So then all I'll do is I'll load the game. This is the last test I'll do actually on a tournament before I'm ready to play and go play deathmatch and warm up. All I do is I'll load the map on Dust 2, or any map really. Come in here, I'll just type clear, so it clears the console. Exact my auto exact, you saw my models move there. Got my nice looking config, tells me everything's loaded. Everything is perfect in here, view models, as you can see, and my models have exactly how I want it. So that's perfect. Then what I'll do is I'll do the sensitivity test, which I've showed in some other videos before, and this is just literally the last test to make sure that my sensitivity is absolutely fine and I'm ready to go and no acceleration. So I'll basically come to a corner, and I know that my sensitivity does a 360 and ends up about there, from one end of the mouse pad to the other. So I'll put my mouse on one end of my mouse pad and find a point like this, and I'll drag slowly to the other side of the mouse pad, and as you can see it's about there, which is right. So I'll just shoot there. Then what I'll do is I'll do it again slowly. So again, one end to the mouse pad, there you go, and then I'll do it really quick just to make sure I've got no acceleration. And as you can see, I've got no acceleration at all. So now I know perfectly that my mouse pad, my mouse is perfectly set up to how I want. So when I flick around, it's again exactly, I've got no acceleration and I'm ready to go. And yeah, like I said, just everything default with the AWP. You want to make sure you have all those settings on default. As you can see, when I run now, the model doesn't actually sync back into me, whereas if you have this on 21, as you can see when I run, the model syncs back into you like that. So yeah, you don't want that really. Some people like it, I don't particularly like it, so I have that off like that. So when I run, it only syncs back a tiny bit, and just like Mimic Source. And as you can see, my scope is bouncy, just like default, as it should be. And not changed at all. So yeah, that's exactly how I set up my CSGO settings. It's exactly how I set up my PC when I go to LAN events. I'll upload my config that you saw in the video in a RAR file with this video, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you like these videos, keep checking out team-dignitas.org, team-dignitas.org. Obviously Facebook. Support our sponsors, Scan, Alienware, Intel, and all our other sponsors, and obviously support me on Facebook at Facebook, as you can see on my banner, facebook.com/teamdignitas and twitter.com/teamdignitas, and obviously our personal Facebook's facebook.com/Hudzg. And yeah, leave a comment in below and let me know if you like them, and I'll let me know what kind of videos you'd like to see from us as a CSGO team or from me personally, and I'll do my best to deliver on them as regularly as I can. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this video, and hopefully it gave you some insight into how myself, Hudzg from Team Dignitas, sets up his PC. Yeah, take care.